Welcome back to the Extra Rep Podcast, guys. I'm Josh.
I'm Liam.
So today is all about recovery. So we're going to go through the science of recovery, why recovery is so important, obviously especially to do with your weight training. We're obviously going to cover sleep, which we know is a massive one. Obviously we'll cover nutrition as well. We're going to sort of talk about, the difference between complete rest and some active recovery as well, which a lot of you guys will get some plenty of information and plenty of useful information out of. Then we're going to finish with supplements and some recovery hacks that we both like doing as well. But I guess first place to start, Liam, is why is recovery, just as important as training is?
Well, training, we stimulate the muscle. Recovery is where it grows. It's literally as simple as that. You need to recover in order to perform, but you also need to recover in order to perform in all aspects of your life.
Yeah, and I think people forget that where obviously they're going into the gym. When you go into the gym, you are going to be breaking down muscle tissue. And it's not as simple as it being just built back up. But the recovery process is where sort of the strength adaptations occur, where you're able to get to that point where you should be able to come back and then get stronger. So like we said, if we sleep well, nutrition's good. We'll obviously talk about training volume in a sec. But those three are really going to be sort of key when we're talking, especially about recovery.
Definitely. And look, movement is recovery as well, as you mentioned before, with active recovery. So moving and actually just going out for walks, something that's really low stress on the central nervous system, but helps increase blood flow. So helps actually get nutrients to the certain inflammation, which is the damage that you've caused the muscle cell. So it upregulates that nutrient absorption, drives glucose into the cell, drives water into the cell. Like, it just really aids in the recovery process.
Yeah, and that's something we'll definitely talk about when we talk about that, active recovery as well. But
Yep.
Going back to obviously training, obviously with training, there's a really big focus, especially these days, on smacking yourself in the gym, sweating, F45, all those type of sessions. So if you want to sort of explain why, being structured with your weight training and when it comes to training volume, what people should look out for and what people should really sort of strive towards and maybe strive away from as well.
Yeah. So if you're doing a leg day and you can't walk properly for 4 days after, you've done too much volume. It is as simple as that. There's no badge of honor for being so sore that you can't do daily tasks anymore. It's just a sign of muscle damage. Like, it's not a sign of growth. Yes, it's really good for the ego to be like, oh, I'm so sore after that leg workout. But realistically, you didn't have to do 4 sets of 15 on your Bulgarian split squats. Yes, you can't walk up the stairs and it's painful, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your legs grew.
And I think it's really interesting because obviously, when we go back to training and telling people to train hard enough as well, there are those sessions where everyone's done them where, you can't walk out of the gym, but on one hand you go, too much volume, 100%, not going to recover 100%. But at the same time, it does teach you that bit of mental resilience, and you still do need to push yourself, but then now we need to factor back the volume. Now we need to say, okay, if you just picked 1 or 2 sets, went really hard, close to, if not on failure around that period, depending on what you're doing, then you're going to see much better results and going to be able to recover a lot quicker before your next session.
Exactly. And it is as simple as that, guys. You do just need 1 working set to drive muscle growth. Yes, we recommend 2, but 1 set of around 5 to 7, 8 to 9, however many it may be till failure, is all you need to get muscle growth.
And I think that comes back to frequency as well. It's like not just 1 set, 1 muscle group once per week.
Nope.
You need to do that multiple times per week as well. Again, we're not going to go into programming this episode. There's so much we can sort of go through there. But I think the main takeaway is being able to get the maximum from the minimum amount you're doing with your training. If you can maximize, growth for 1 set of each muscle group, etc., that's when you're going to see the best results because fatigue is going to be less and you will recover more and you'll be able to train the muscle more frequently.
Yeah, it depends on the person as well at their stage of their lifting career. I mean, for more advanced people who have been doing it for 10 plus years like you and I, we really have to manage our volume and we actually have to prioritize our recovery. Whereas people that are just new to the gym sometimes do need to prioritize just actually getting in and doing a bit of volume rather than their recovery because they're building a new habit and they're not really worrying about the rest of the day-to-day stuff that can come into play when it comes into volume and lifting. Because look, we know the drivers for muscle growth. We're not going to go over it on this podcast, don't worry. But all these other factors of recovery can come into play for your performance in the gym. So this can be like work stress, could be like financial stress, family stress, emotional stress. That stuff can really impact how much volume you can actually tolerate in the gym.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that one final point I'll make before we move on is that when you're a beginner, you're not going to be lifting much weight, right? You might be lifting 30 kilos in your bench press. Once you become more advanced, you might be lifting sets of 100 kilos.
Yep.
So think about the difference that makes, even though your recovery probably has hopefully improved by then as well, it's a much bigger tax on the body as you get to those levels. That's why you'll see, obviously bodybuilders take steroids and things like that to combat that. But they will be a lot more meticulous with their recovery as well. Yeah,
we can touch on that just quickly. Whatever your favorite influencer who is admitted to juicing is doing as a program does not mean it works for you. It does not mean it works for you. They are doing a shit ton amount more volume that they can recover from because they're enhanced that you simply cannot. So an influencer, or let's just say you watched an old school bodybuilding Olympia, Jay Cutler did this, Arnold did, 6 hours in the gym a day and stuff. It's like, no, you don't need to be doing that at all.
Yeah. And of course, like I said, it goes back to how much muscle do you want to grow? In an ideal world, if you want to grow as much muscle as possible, you just jump on the gear straight away. But there becomes a big rabbit hole that you probably, for 99% of people, don't want to go down, and we won't cover that in this podcast. But we're going to move on and talk more specifically about sleep now. So you guys have heard me say this study before, people who slept 5 hours, people who slept 8 hours, similar calories, similar protein, everything was pretty controlled. The people who slept 8 hours actually gained more muscle and lost more body fat, whereas in the opposite, obviously, they lost muscle and gained a bit of body fat, despite them both losing the same amount of weight on the scale. So it is a really big thing when you're looking after your recovery, especially with your sleep. It's going to promote everything. Obviously you're going to be cognitively better, you're going to be less hungry. There's going to be 100 other things that are going to work in your favor when it comes to improving your body composition.
I mean, to be devil's advocate there's also studies showing that, a workout can inhibit the results of a bad night's sleep. So if you've had a really shit night's sleep and you think you can't train, that's not true. You still can train. You should still be logging your performance and monitoring, the other aspects of your pre and post workout nutrition that we'll touch on, but that can still happen even if you get a shit night's sleep.
Yeah, I think that is interesting because, again, some people might come in and be like, check my Oura ring, my sleep's not perfect today. I better not go to the gym, I better not push it.
Let's touch on wearables because it's really good to see data for a short period of time, but that data can completely fuck you.
Yeah, you can't let it dictate your life.
Yeah, it can, you could intuitively wake up, no alarm, and be like, I actually felt good. I had some crazy lucid dreams last night, all this stuff. But you check your Apple Watch, which is what I've got, you check your Oura ring or whatever, and let's say it says you got 0 deep sleep or your resting heart rate was high or just something was off according to the data. But you were like, I had a really good night's sleep. I thought, you've now started that morning, you've shifted and gone, well, I had a crap night's sleep. So you've told yourself that you had a crap night's sleep, even though you woke up feeling fine, and that will inhibit and dictate your decisions throughout the day.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one thing where, like I said, wearables are great and it's good to track for a period of time, but there will be a point in time where once that's all sort of sorted, you're sleeping well, you're doing all those right things, you might get to a point where the data starts to, like I said, fuck with your head a bit more, and that starts to, like I said, inhibit your decision making. So it's something where, when we're talking about sleep, I guess, it just goes back to the same sort of stuff that we have talked about in the sleep podcast, cool, dark, quiet room, trying to get off your technology a couple of hours before bed, trying to get some sunlight first thing in the morning, and trying to get some sort of routine, with your nutrition and structure as well. Because like we know, if you're going to eat a massive dinner, then try and go to bed half an hour later, your body's going to be trying to digest the food and it's going to say, what are you doing? As a result, you're probably going to get less sleep.
Well, this is where wearables can come into play because you will see the data that your resting heart rate is higher when you had a meal at 8:30 and you went to bed at 9. You'll be like, okay, that's 20 beats higher. It's just good to get that feedback and knowledge. But I will say, I'm someone who tracked my sleep for 2 years straight with my Apple Watch. And then I started, almost 3 years. And the data was pretty relevant day in, day out. So I got to the point where it's like, okay, I don't need this anymore. Were there some nights where it wasn't perfect? Yes. And it was good to know certain data of when something spiked or whatever. But even wearing a Bluetooth wearable is a form of stress on the body. It is a small form of radiation, electronic magnetic frequency. When we're trying to turn devices off around bed for sleep, yes, it can have a small impact that people don't think about.
Yeah.
It's you've still got an electronic on your wrist or on your ring finger or whatever it may be, or a Whoop band.
Yeah. I need to get my tinfoil hat and find it and be able to put it on whenever you go half tinfoil.
It's not even half. Like, look, all the research is out there with EMF exposure affecting the electricity in your brain and your heart. And when you're trying to get a good night's sleep, like I used to coach a guy, he couldn't get sleep when he moved into this apartment, and it was like near this elevator with all these wires. And then the second they actually shifted the bed and turned it on the other side of the wall, slept like a baby.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Then, like I said, that's because the research is, still so far behind what it, could be or should be.
Oh, exactly.
You find out a lot of stuff, 10, 20 years later when, there's stuff that is obviously, fantastic now that, a lot of other people won't pick up then. So, we'll talk about that in a bit more of a future supplementation episode, but we'll head back sort of to nutrition as well. In terms of obviously optimal recovery, I think obviously we know protein's a big one. We want to keep protein at least 2 grams per kilo of body weight. And of course, all this is going to depend on your calories as well, like how many calories you have. But in an ideal world, you want something pre-workout and then you want something sort of post-workout. Obviously, we call it the anabolic window. And there's been a lot of research now to suggest that it's like, it's not as effective as people once thought it was, but that doesn't mean it's not effective. You know what I mean?
I would argue that pre-workout nutrition is more important than post-workout.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And why would you say that?
Performance will increase with pre-workout nutrition.
Yeah. So you'll find like if you can get a meal with some protein and some, depending on how many hours before you train, so some sort of carbs. Obviously, the closer to your workout, the more high GI, faster acting carbs you'd want. With some protein, a little bit further away, you can probably get away with some lower GI stuff, but. Like my sort of rule for clients, if they can afford to have it, is like if you can get 50 grams of carbs in, a couple of hours before your workout with some protein, that's going to put you probably in a really, really good position. Obviously hydration as well, but those two things together are generally going to lead to a much more effective workout than if you had neither of those things.
Yeah, and I would just say for anyone, I'd use a protocol of just banana and honey.
Yeah,
it's so simple, it's so quick, it's really easy on the gut, it's easy to absorb. In combination with a coffee, of course. But a lot of my guys, like if they're getting up first thing in the morning. So they're training at before 5 a.m. They need to get up at 4. They're not going to, make toast or make a big meal or, scrambled eggs and toast or anything like that. Just a banana, coffee and honey, good to go. And their lifts are greased.
I think that's a good thing to cover is obviously when you are, if you're training first thing in the morning, again, ideally, we don't like to train fasted, again, depending on fat loss and things like that. You might have to from time to time, shit happens. But I think, if you can make sure, especially pre-workout, you can fuel yourself. Obviously, ideally, would we like to get some protein in within the first, half an hour to an hour after a workout? Of course. Yep. But if we can't, it's probably not the end of the world. Like as long as your daily protein on that day still hits, the target, I think, it holds you in pretty good stead. But if you're looking to go that extra level from just, tracking your calories, tracking your protein, really start looking at your pre and post-workout nutrition because if you start getting that right, that's what's going to drive training performance. And if you can improve training performance, then of course, that's going to lead to improving body composition, more muscle, less body fat.
Yeah. One hack for some people is literally just EAAs and electrolytes just during the workout. Like, it's not ideal. Like it's more ideal if you had the banana and honey and all that. But like, even if you have that, it just helps with breaking down the muscle tissue and really just performing a little bit longer in the gym. You'll get a little bit more out of it with EAAs and electrolytes in your system. And then you can keep that, as we call it, the anabolic window. You can push that a few hours further to like a later brekkie or whenever.
Yeah. I do recommend electrolytes for all of my clients, especially the ones that can afford the carbs, having electrolytes with the carbs in them, fantastic. If not, having a lower calorie alternative of electrolytes, especially first thing in the morning, because when we wake up, generally we're going to be extremely dehydrated. And that's going to reduce our muscle contraction. So we're not going to be as strong unless we are, hydrated. So definitely something like that. And again, an EAA. Do you want to explain why you prefer an EAA over a BCAA?
Yeah, essential amino acids. So it's about 20 amino acids there. It actually helps with the, what's the word? Not muscle protein synthesis. I'm having a brain fart. To stop the catabolism of the muscle.
Stop it breaking down.
Yes, but there's a specific term for it. I'm trying to think.
I'll just say catabolism.
Yeah, catabolism. Fuck it.
breaking down muscle tissue.
We've explained it anyway. So it will just help stop breaking that muscle tissue down. Whether it's branched chain amino acids, there's literally only like 3 to 5 in there, which won't really do much at all.
And I remember there was a bit of research back in the day. It's really hard because, like, if you're going to take a BCAA, you may as well just take a whey protein or an EAA.
Yeah.
That's sort of, we're not saying it's bad and you can't use them, but it's like, it might give you like 5 grams of protein where, an EAA, again, they're all essential, especially like, intra workout, I guess. But ideally, like, as long as you're having some protein before, protein after, and keeping hydrated, they're sort of the 3 key things with your nutrition that you sort of, I guess, really need to focus on when it comes to that. But back to recovery, obviously we were talking earlier in the podcast about active recovery and sort of complete rest. So how would you know when to be like, I guess, have an active recovery day as opposed to be like, fuck, I need to sit on the couch all day and actually have a complete rest?
I usually go by general mood and energy levels. That's probably the biggest marker for me. I notice if like I'm, completely like, I feel like I can't do day-to-day tasks, or like, for example, if things just feel like they're a lot more of an effort than they should be, then I'm like, okay, I need to just chill out for a bit. I need to just calm down. Sometimes, look, going for a walk's the best way. And look, I don't think there's many days where it ever is just sitting on the couch all day. I think you should still do the active rest every single day. But just take the time off when you need it. Yeah. And you'll know when you need it intuitively.
Yeah. And I think people do forget that, like I said, the mental load that us humans go through these days is probably a lot bigger than what it was once upon a time. And it's something that we need to really pay attention to, because if that mental load's burning out, and you're, like I said, smashing yourself in the gym, high stress job, like all this stuff is going to snowball. And eventually, like, you will have that day where, I've got clients who, like, by the time they get to Sunday, for example, they just need a day on the couch and they can barely move, which is obviously something we want to work on, but their body just needs to recover, after everything they've done. They might be walking, they might be working 60 hours, doing all the gym sessions, wife, family, kids, finances. Of course you're going to have your weeks, you're not going to have your weeks, but those sort of things are really important. You will, I guess, get better at figuring out when you need those times and when to push and pull. But at the same time, if you don't push yourself to a certain limit, you're never going to know where you can go and where you can sort of assess, like, I guess we call it like a stress tolerance. Everyone sort of can, it's like a video game where you can sort of like unlock a new level.
You can level up.
I've always thought, like, at one point I'm like, I couldn't possibly take any more clients, or I can't do this. And then you just sort of get used to it. And then that next level opens up, and the next level. And not that I'm advocating for just being busy and working all the time. There's got to be a balance. But I think it goes back to listening to your body at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I saw some statistics and data that we as humans consume 60 hours of different information per week, whether it's like news, words, people, whatever. Like, our brain is consuming that every single week. So if you think about that compared to like 20 years ago, no wonder so many people, they say like, oh, like, my life's not that hard, or I'm not that stressed at my job or anything, but I'm just so tired at the end of the week. It's like your brain and mental fatigue is taking in so much that you're trying to process. I'm having that conversation time and time again with people. They're just like, I just don't know why I'm so tired. But it's not like a physical tired. It's a mental fatigue. And it can inhibit recovery.
For sure. Like, the body doesn't know the difference between, stress from your job or stress from training intensity. So I think that's a really good one. When we talk about recovery methods, obviously, you've got your sort of stuff these days, like your massage guns, your ice baths, that sort of stuff. I think, they all have a place in a period of time, but I think it's important not to rely on these for recovery. I think if you can go back and go, okay, keeping my training volume low, obviously sleeping well and looking after my nutrition, if you can do those 3 things, and obviously, managing your stress, doing stuff you enjoy, that's just going to take you so much further than being like, oh, I'm just going to jump on the massage gun for 5 minutes and assume that I'm going to be fine now, or jump in an ice bath for 5 minutes. I'm like, sweet, I'm good, I'm recovered, I can go again.
You don't need to pay all this money and like spend $600 on a massage gun and all this stuff for recovery. Like, the basic methods still work. And there's a lot of overlooked ones, like literally just sitting down on the couch and watching something on Amazon Prime for an hour can just shut your brain off and shut your nervous system down, really get the resting heart rate down. Something simple as literally being social and catching up with a friend over the weekend, like sort of energizes and recharges you. Probably worth noting, if you feel more drained than recharged after that interaction, maybe look at your friends. But look, they're really overlooked methods.
I think even just going back to, like, it will come back down to what you enjoy doing. So it's like, say for example, we use stretching as probably a really good example because, you know, by itself, does stretching do all that much? It's like, well, yeah, it can help improve mobility, blood flow, etc. But the main thing it probably does is help calm your heart rate down, which is going to lead you to be in, you know, less of a stressed state. So it's like the sauna I've got at home as well. The main reason I bought the sauna wasn't for the recovery benefits. It was so I have half an hour to myself to just chill out and actually just bring, you know, everything back to baseline. You know, so these are sort of things where, of course, you've got to sort of find what works for you. But the main reason these recovery methods all work and why they're marketed so well is they make you think like you recovered back 100%, where if you just focus on the big rocks and picked a couple of things that helped you de-stress, whether it's, you know, sport, hobbies, sauna, etc., you'll get the best results out of your recovery there as well.
Yep. I think going back to the nutrition as well, one thing we just didn't touch on was the importance of carbs. We talk about protein being so important, but when you eat carbs with protein, like carbohydrates are very protein sparing. So you increase your carbohydrates, you also get a huge dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin response, which puts your body into a parasympathetic state. So actually puts your brain and body in more of a calmer state. So a lot of people go the low carb route, and then people that are going keto and carnivore are finding their adrenal glands and thymus glands and all that stuff are starting to shit themselves. And cortisol goes through the roof. Now, that's not everyone, because, look, it's a very effective diet for people with autoimmune conditions, but for the average Joe and who is metabolically decently healthy and is putting an effort to actually get a better lifestyle with sleep and nutrition and everything, carbs play a huge role.
I've always found it interesting, like, I don't know if there's been any studies yet where they get someone who's more like keto or carnivore and, you know, they'll compare them, but they'll give someone, you know, like a massive dose, like 100 grams of carbs pre-workout for, you know, 12 weeks or something, and just see what the difference is like how they feel, how they train. It'd be really, really interesting to see if there was any, you know, like randomized control studies or something about that, because I do think it really is a bigger thing than a lot of people, you know, give it credit for. Of course, you know, coming to the gym, having a bit of willpower, getting the extra rep out is great. If you're recovered, that's awesome. But carbs like that little cheat code to get you that extra, you know, extra 10% and almost guarantee that, you know, provided you're switched on, you should be progressing, you know, the lifts in the gym, which of course will then lead to, you know, better recovery, advanced body composition, etc.
In reference to that study, I'm not sure if there's a particular one like that, but there are studies on the effects of like what type of carbs. So like if someone's taking just pure maltodextrin as their carbohydrate source, yeah, they don't tolerate it GI-wise the best. You know, it's a massive blood sugar spike, huge insulin spike.
So what's a
all that stuff.
maltodextrin for the viewers?
Maltodextrin?
Yeah.
It's the pure form of a carbohydrate. It's like a white powder.
So like sugar almost, like basically
Pretty
the same,
much
basically
sugar.
the same
Well,
thing.
yeah, it all converts to the same thing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, maltodextrin is pretty much the highest on the glycemic index scale, if we're referencing it for that. Whereas if someone, you know, had honey, it has a completely different response in the liver, the way, you know, it breaks down and releases insulin and everything. So, you know, there's multiple different ways, but then there's a whole argument about fructose, and some people are fructose intolerant, and some people feel really good on apples, and then some people feel awful on bananas. So there is a really sort of food intolerance thing when it comes to the carbohydrates, but quality source really matters. Like the whole bodybuilding, eat your rice cakes and stuff used to be a really big thing. Then some people eat rice cakes and they're like, well, the grains don't agree with me. My body feels bloated and shit. And it's like, well, it's just rice cakes. You should be fine. No, unfortunately. Some people eat rice, feel amazing. Some people eat rice and feel like crap.
And I think, like, yeah, going back to the rice, like I always found, for example, like I was like, I'll go from white rice to brown rice because that's better for you.
It's the healthy version.
It's the healthy version.
Oh, no.
And now I'm on basmati rice and I'm like, that's just, you know, that's from what I've found is the best absorbing, the best digested for me, the way it works. So you do have to play around with your carb sources there. People will have different intolerances, different issues with different things. Again, could be underlying gut issues. Won't go through that in this podcast, but it is something to...
I can save someone quickly there. You don't have to do a food sensitivity test. Just keep a log of how you feel 5 to 10 minutes to 20 minutes after you eat something. It's just being intuitive and understanding how your body reacts and feels. Yeah. You don't need to pay $400 to a naturopath to do a food intolerance test. That will change, by the way, within 7 to 28 days when your gut microbiome shifts and turns over.
I think that's a really good way to sort of shift into the best supplements and sort of recovery hacks that we sort of have, I guess, as humans at the moment, which, again, before you go into supplements, any of this, like we've talked about before, nail your training, nail your sleep, nail your nutrition, and then obviously have some sort of active recovery. That's going to do much more than what we're about to talk about is going to do. But for supplementation, obviously, like potentially having, like we said, a carb powder, EAA, electrolytes, they're all going to help with obviously hydration, pushing in the gym if you've got the calories for them as well. Fish oil, I find, just your basic multivitamin, fish oil, vitamin D, they're all obviously going to help indirectly as well. And I guess...
I'd disagree on that one.
Would you? Oh, there you go.
I did a whole seminar for coaches this week and explained the difference between like a general multivitamin and then certain vitamins of like, say, fish oil toxicity, and you should go for cod liver oil instead because the EPA and DHA ratio is much better of omega-3s. So just be careful on the fish oil because... Look, for the general population, it's good to take fish oil, but the source of it is very important. And same as a multivitamin, a lot of them could be doing absolutely fuck all.
Yeah, especially with absorption, I find, is the main thing. It's like you'll get two things that'll compete, across that blood-brain barrier. And it'll be like, this will go through and this won't. So it's like, potentially half or 3/4 of the ingredients that are in there are not getting absorbed.
Just to elaborate on that, because this is a bit of my wheelhouse. So you'll get a multivitamin, right? You will get the cheapest form of versions, like you'll get like a zinc or magnesium oxide instead of like a glycinate or a citrate. Then at the same time, they actually work on the same transport chain, so they compete for each other. Then you've also got synthesized versions of vitamin B that are water soluble. Then you've got vitamin D, which is a fat soluble, so they have to compete with each other. Then you've got ones that aren't even the methyl group, that if someone who's got the MTHFR gene, which 60% of the population do, they won't even methylate those vitamins. So a lot of people waste their money on stuff that they don't need.
Yeah.
And I will say, we're talking about supplements here for recovery. Just go with magnesium glycinate.
Yeah.
So simple, really calming on the nervous system, calming on like the bones, joints, muscles, everything. 250 to 500 milligrams a day, and you could just be set with just that. One thing I would recommend is a sleep supplement if you do really struggle. I use Night Ops. I don't take it anymore, but I used to use that religiously. It was amazing. Do you want to tell us about Dream?
Yeah, so Axe Labs, shout out to them. That's probably Dream is their supplement. Not cheap, but you pay for quality. Every time I've had that, for example, if I know I'm going to get, maybe under 7 hours sleep for whatever reason that may be, or I know I've got an absolutely massive day, take a scoop of that, and that just absolutely knocks me out, gives you some whack dreams, but geez, you wake up and it's probably the only sleep supplement I've taken and been like, wow, that actually really worked. I actually really noticed the difference. Obviously, you can't out-train, the bad sleep routine and all that sort of stuff, so you still need to get that in check. This isn't just like, you can have this every night and it's just going to amazingly make you feel better. You've got to do it in conjunction with, fixing up sleep routine and all that sort of stuff as well. But Axe Labs Dream, strongly recommend. And I haven't tried the Night Ops, but I've heard good things from that as well. The last thing I will mention is, probably a bit taboo, but CBD gummies can be something that I know me and the girlfriend have had a few now. And every time, just more so from a calming perspective, calming down before bed, stopping the mind from racing as much. I find that's quite good as well. So it was Hemp Pharmacy, I think it was, with a F instead of PH. We'll pop a link for the description there, but I use their stuff as well, and I've found really good results. But again, before doing all this, you've got to cover what we just covered, go through training, go through sleep, go through nutrition, and go through your active recovery first. I think the last thing I want to touch on is like your heart rate or your HRV and how that sort of impacts recovery and how you can start, I guess, almost telling when your body's going to start being under strain or sick or you've pushed things too far.
Well, are you talking in regards to sleep or general?
I think just in general, like how you feel, how you perform,
Gotcha.
Like if you're like, oh, my lifts are going down or I'm just not feeling quite right.
Yeah. Well, one really good thing about like wearing a wearable and tracking your workouts is you can notice in correlation if you're on a program, you can notice if your heart rate's either elevated or not. And I've noticed that just from a pure nervous system metric. It's like, I don't really look into HRV, like it's very sporadic. Like HRV, for people that don't know, is heart rate variability. So you want it as high as possible, essentially. Sometimes it can be in the gutter, sometimes it can be high. It can be a good measure, but it usually measures the second you wake up, and it varies so much throughout the day. So the only time you really need to check it is if you wake up. And it can literally change if you check your phone, because then you see notifications, your brain turns on, a whole bunch of things are different. So I don't usually like to measure it because it can be so really variable, but resting heart rate, I'll touch on the workout side of things. That's the best way for heart rate, because you can notice if your heart rate is increased a little bit more during a set. Like, for example, there was one time where I was coming down with something, but I had no idea. It's like the small symptoms, that maybe a little bit of a squiggle in the back of the throat, but I did one warm-up set of Romanian deadlifts, and we're talking the 20-kilo bar, and my heart rate was at 170, and I was like, what the hell? Like, that's not right. And then, performance was down the gutter that day, and then later on got sick and sort of understood there. But if you want to know how you're going to get a good night's sleep, try get your resting heart rate as low as possible before. The last point I'll say on that is, if you just keep your dinner at least 2 to 3 hours away from when you're going to go to bed, that's your best chance of getting your heart rate as low as possible before you go to bed.
Yeah. And I think just touching on that, getting your heart rate down, so like, going back to active recovery and that, you probably should be doing some sort of cardiovascular activity 1 to 2 times a week, depending on what your heart rate is. But, ideally you'd probably want it down around, 60 beats per minute, if not less. I know 60 to 90 is like the normal. And again, some will be like higher and lower as well. But the lower it is, the better it is for you, for your heart, for your health, etc. So that is something that we'll strongly recommend you take away as well, because that will eventually improve all these markers as well, and enable you to recover quicker and more effectively.
Yeah, I will say, like, it does come into play with not just metabolic health, but like how heavy you are in general. The more body fat you lose, the more weight you lose, the more your resting heart rate will come down. Yeah, so that's a good indicator as well. For example, like mine's between 40 to 50. And sometimes it goes under that when I sleep.
Yeah, I think one's similar things. Yeah, early 40s, late 40s, something like that.
And
but like, I don't do
awesome,
I don't do a crazy amount of cardio. Maybe once, twice a week.
You walk every day.
Yeah.
See, it's as simple as that for some people. You just need to move and be active.
Yeah, and then slowly, like I said, you'll be able to go up into zone 2 cardio. Do that once a week. Just getting moving, getting sweating, half an hour a week. That's something on top of your weight training that, again, you can do to help your recovery, of course.
After your weight training.
Exactly, yeah. But then when you go into, like the high intensity HIIT stuff, we're not going to cover that today, but that is something where, again, that goes back down the rabbit hole of, programming and recovering from your programming. And that's when you have to have someone, a coach who's quite smart, and you might have to be in, have more calories or things like that. Everything needs to be set up to be able to then maybe hit a HIIT or 2 HIIT sessions a week or something like that. To help. There's a lot of things around oxidizing fat and that sort of stuff with the higher intensity stuff, but a lot of people don't do it properly because they're already under recovered to begin with.
Yeah.
Sweet. Awesome, guys. I think that's a great place to leave it. Hope you guys got plenty of value out of this episode. Again, if you have any questions for myself or for Liam, you can catch us with all the social links below. But until next time, guys, we will see you in the next episode.
Thanks, guys.